My fiancé of 3 years had been giving me the cold shoulder. At a high society banquet, he publicly proposed to his first love. Later, I posted an announcement online, brimming with sweetness, "Getting married soon." That same night, he called me, "Wallace, I never said I was marrying you." I chuckled lightly and replied, "I never said the groom was you." Shortly after, a set of photos went viral, shocking the city. The man who held immense power in this town had his arms open, letting me fall into his embrace. He even lowered his head willingly, allowing me to kiss him. As I finished putting on my dress and stood up, the makeup artist couldn't help but gasp, "Miss Wallace, you look stunning in that gown." I softly thanked her. As I stepped out, I noticed a commotion downstairs. Through the grand golden revolving doors came my fiancé of 3 years, Cyril, arm in arm with a young and beautiful woman. Even more ridiculous was that her dress was identical to mine. Tonight was an unprecedented grand event in decades. The guests, all standing at the apex of society, were sharp-eyed and discerning. It took only a glance for them to notice that my dress was merely a cheap imitation. In my 21 years, this was the first time I had dressed up so elegantly, only to play the role of a lavishly dressed clown. "Cyril, who is this lady beside you?" someone asked. Cyril clasped the woman's hand and replied, "This is my girlfriend, Stacy. After tonight, she'll be my fiancée." "And Miss Wallace?" the person pressed. Cyril turned to me coldly and said, "Our engagement has been annulled. For the past 3 years, my family has already been more than generous to yours." He wasn't wrong. Without the billion-dollar betrothal gift at the time of our engagement, my family's company would have gone bankrupt long ago. Could my parents, siblings, and I still enjoy our current luxurious lives? Cyril knelt on one knee, pulled out a diamond ring, and proposed to Stacy. She burst into tears and threw herself into his arms. He gently wiped her tears, comforting and kissing her. I watched as Stacy was surrounded by socialites who eagerly fawned over her. After tonight, she would no longer be an obscure actress or a mistress scorned by society. And I, Wallace, would likely lose my place in this city and even in my family. "Could you move aside?" A voice came from behind me. I turned around to see two socialite girls holding dessert plates, looking at me impatiently. I stepped aside. Her dress looked so cheap. Yeah, who knows what kind of material was used? Might even cause an allergic reaction. And she still has the nerve to stand here? How embarrassing. Expressionless, I walked toward a corner seating area, pretending not to hear their malicious remarks. My phone buzzed, and I answered. My mother's angry voice came through, "Wallace, if the engagement is off, we have to return $5 million. You're such a failure for not holding on to a man's heart for 3 years. Find a way to pay it yourself. Don't expect me to help." I stared at the disconnected call, my chest tightening painfully. The dazzling lights and glamorous outfits around me felt worlds away. All I wanted was to escape. "I heard Mr. Egbert returned yesterday and will attend tonight's banquet." "That's unlikely. Mr. Egbert rarely shows up at events like this." Pressing my aching chest, I opened my bag to look for medicine. The sound of my rummaging startled the two who had been speaking. Their conversation stopped, and their footsteps gradually receded. The pain in my chest turned into spasms, and the corset of my gown felt suffocating. I fumbled with the hidden clasps, trying to breathe. But my newly done nails, beautiful yet useless, made it impossible to undo the clasps. Gasping for air, my hair disheveled, I collapsed onto the deck. My lips had turned a sickly gray white. Nearby, the banquet was in full swing. My ex-fiancé and his beloved were likely dancing sweetly, while I might silently die here on this quiet deck. "Sir, are you going in now?" Egbert didn't respond, taking the cigarette case handed to him by his assistant. He lit a cigarette after dipping its tip in a fine spice powder. "I'll finish this cigarette first," he said, walking toward the deck railing. The group around him tactfully left, knowing not to disturb him. As he smoked, he noticed a frail figure not far away. He was about to turn away but stopped at the sound of a dull thud on the deck. Turning back, he saw someone collapsed under the dim moonlight, a sight both helpless and strangely alluring. My face was probably ghostly pale by then. Under the faint moonlight, I must have looked twisted and unrecognizable. But seeing the stranger in front of me felt like grabbing onto a lifeline. I clutched his sleeve tightly, using all my remaining strength to pull his hand to my chest. Breathing heavily, my heart rate erratic, I could barely speak. He glanced at me and seemed to understand my condition. Kneeling, he firmly grasped my wrist and asked, calmly, "Where's the zipper on your dress?" I couldn't respond, struggling instead to guide his hand to my chest. His brows furrowed slightly as he removed my hand and looked at my dress's neckline. With deft fingers, he undid the intricate row of clasps. Relief washed over me as the constriction around my chest disappeared, and I greedily inhaled the fresh air. I'd completely forgotten that beneath my dress, I wore only adhesive petals over my chest. Now, with the front of my gown undone, I had been entirely exposed. It wasn't until a man's jacket, still warm, draped over me that I snapped back to reality. Biting my lip, I looked up and whispered, "Thank you. Can you stand?" I nodded, clutching the jacket with one hand and steadying myself on the railing with the other. "Should I contact your family or a friend for you?" I shook my head hastily. "No, I'll be fine after resting for a bit." His phone suddenly rang. I saw him step aside to take the call. "I told you, I'll handle the marriage arrangements myself. Don't worry, I won't let Grandpa leave this world with regrets." He seemed slightly irritable, lighting another cigarette. The glow from the cigarette illuminated his sharp features, and a thought struck me, I had seen him somewhere before. As he hung up and turned back toward me, our eyes met. I quickly averted my gaze. Noticing my discomfort with the cigarette smoke, he extinguished it and gestured toward the jacket. "Just hand the jacket to a staff member later." My face flushed as I nodded and whispered, "Okay." His gaze lingered on my hands clutching his jacket. Inside, my gown was undone, with only the adhesive petals shielding my skin. An intimacy no one else could perceive hung in the air. Feeling self-conscious, I hunched slightly. Just as he was about to leave, I softly called out, "I just heard your phone earlier. Can I make a deal with you?" I gathered the courage to lift my eyes to look at him. Maybe he needs a wife, someone trouble-free, who can disappear at any time. And I need 50 million to buy my pitiful freedom. A deal? What kind of deal would Miss Wallace like to make with me? I was so nervous I didn't even notice he knew my name. "Do you need a wife?" I mustered all my courage and stared at him steadily. "I won't cause you any trouble. I'll do my best to cooperate." "Of course, and when you don't need me, I won't be a bother." He looked at me under the moonlight, wearing a silver gray shirt and dark trousers, his lean but tall body wrapped in them. His brows were soft, but his jawline was sharp. I noticed the watch on his wrist, it probably cost as much as the luxurious cruise ship I was on. "What's your condition?" I froze for a moment, feeling embarrassed, and spoke slowly, "I need 50 million. "For what?" I lowered my lashes, unable to meet his gaze. But in front of a stranger, it almost felt like I could show my helplessness and awkwardness without reservation. "My fiancé wants to break off the engagement and demands half the money back." 50 million, I can't come up with it. "Break off the engagement?" He suddenly turned to look at me, his eyes sharp as a blade. "Yes, break off the engagement." I gave a light laugh and looked up at him. The sea breeze tousled my long hair, and I stared blankly into the deep night. "I have no way out, sir. I accept the deal, but I have one condition." I looked up at him in disbelief. "Sir? Marry me within 3 days. That soon? You heard my phone call earlier. My grandfather's not in good health, and he's eager to attend my wedding." He raised an eyebrow, looking at me. "Is that inconvenient?" I quickly shook my head. "No, it's fine." "Then it's settled." The sea breeze grew stronger, and my hair was blown messily against my face. Suddenly, he stepped closer, brushing the stray strands of hair from my face and tucking them behind my ear. "In 2 days, I'll send someone to pick you up." "But how do you know where I am?" He didn't answer, and when his hand withdrew, it almost seemed like his fingertip had grazed my face. But maybe it was just my imagination. He left, and I was left in a strange daze, as if stuck in a dream. Until a tipsy Cyril suddenly came over and grabbed my wrist. "Wallace, I've been waiting for you to bow your head and beg me for the past 3 years. As long as you're willing to soften up like those women, forget 100 million, I'll give you 1 billion. You're drunk, Cyril. I pushed him away with all my strength, but a drunk man was hard to shake off. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes, then looked at my suit. Whose suit are you wearing? It's none of your business, Cyril. None of my business? His handsome face twisted in anger. I'll see who dares touch my woman. He grabbed the suit I was wearing, yanking at it. I tried to hold on, but it was futile. The sea breeze blew fiercely, and under the moonlight, my body was exposed. Wallace. Cyril murmured, dazed. The next second, a shrill female voice rang out. Wallace. You have no shame. Oh my God, how could she seduce someone else's fiancé? Cyril's eyes are all over her. Stacy, look at her tricks. I snapped back to reality, flustered, trying to cover my chest. But Stacy had already rushed at me, crying and raising her hand to slap me. What's going on here? A deep male voice suddenly spoke, calming the scene. Stacy froze, and the next moment, Cyril pulled her aside. I quickly stepped back, raising my arms to cover my chest in panic. Everyone turned to look, and someone gasped. It's Mr. Egbert. I widened my eyes and looked toward the back of the crowd. It was the man who helped me untie my corset on the deck. The man I had boldly asked to be my husband and to give me 50 million. And now, it turned out to be the famous Mr. Egbert. Egbert glanced at me once and then looked away. He turned to his secretary and said something, and she immediately walked over to me, helping me put the suit jacket back on. Miss Wallace, let me take you downstairs to rest. I stiffly nodded and thanked her. As she helped me leave, I couldn't help but glance back. The crowd had quietly dispersed, standing still and respectfully. Mr. Egbert, this is a misunderstanding. Cyril, sobering up, carefully tried to explain. A misunderstanding? Egbert's voice remained calm, showing no signs of anger. I paused, standing at the corner. The secretary didn't hurry me, patiently waiting. Cyril's voice trembled. Stacy is my girlfriend. She must have misunderstood and acted out. Egbert's gaze turned sharp, a hint of displeasure in his eyes. I don't believe there's such a poorly mannered woman in today's high society. Cyril was awkward, and Stacy was on the verge of tears. Egbert turned to his subordinate. Take this lady off the ship. Cyril. Stacy sobbed, clutching his sleeve, unwilling to let go. She had been in the entertainment industry for years and knew how serious this was. Being kicked off the ship like this would make her the laughingstock, and there would be no chance for her to recover her reputation. Sir, she knows she was wrong. Please give her another chance. Egbert glanced at him indifferently. You can leave with her. Cyril fell silent and pulled his hand away. Stacy was soon escorted off the ship. The crowd on the deck quietly dispersed. No one expected this scene to end in such a way. Mr. Egbert. The voice of the secretary suddenly snapped me back to reality. I looked up in surprise, and Egbert was walking toward me. He waved the secretary away and asked gently, "Did I scare you?" I shook my head, still in a daze. No, no. I'll take you back to rest first, Egbert said, reaching out and lightly grasping my wrist. Is that okay? I was so disoriented, I nodded absently as he led me forward. After taking a couple of steps, I suddenly felt a chill at my chest. In that moment, the nude-colored petal-shaped breast pad fell out from under the hem of my suit. Egbert turned around, and his gaze followed the pad. I was so embarrassed, I almost wished the ground would swallow me up. But he calmly bent down, picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in his pocket, before soothing me in a gentle voice. It's ruined, so you can't use it again. I'll have someone bring you clean clothes later. My face burned, and I mumbled a small in response. Let's go. Egbert took my hand again. The hallway wasn't long, and we quickly reached the restroom. He let me inside and left to take care of something. I sat there in silence for a while, gradually calming down. But once I did, I realized something. Egbert had called me Miss Wallace at the beginning. He knew my name? Knew who I was? The secretary soon arrived with new clothes. After I took a shower and changed, I folded Egbert's suit jacket and put it in a bag. I planned to dry clean it and return it to him. The sir asked me to bring you down, Miss Wallace, if you want to return. The secretary, in her 30s or 40s, was very competent. Please let him know I'll dry clean the clothes first. It's no trouble. Leave it to me, she said with a smile, taking the bag. I handed it to her and casually asked, how did he know my name? The secretary just smiled slightly. That's a private matter of the sirs. When I got off the ship, I received a text from an unknown number. Egbert, save my number. I stared at the message for a while, before softly typing a reply, okay, I've saved it. I'll pick you up in 2 days. Rest well for the next couple of days. He didn't send any more messages. When I got back to my parents' house, it was already very late. But no one was asleep. The lights were on, but the atmosphere was tense and heavy. As soon as I walked in, my mother immediately stood up. Wallace, have you thought about what you're going to do? How did you upset Cyril? Why is he so angry he wants to break off the engagement? You know our family depends on his company for business and survival. 50 million. Where are we supposed to get that now? Are you trying to kill us? Everyone was blaming me. Blaming me for not being able to hold on to Cyril's heart, for not being able to marry into the family smoothly. So they could keep feeding off of us. But when they pushed me, the sickly little daughter, out just because they were worried about the health of the eldest daughter. Did they ever ask me if I was willing? When I took the 100 million from Cyril's family to fill the gap and maintain the extravagant lifestyle, did I ever enjoy a single bit of it? Now, they want to break the engagement, and yet I'm the one who has to bear the 50 million. Fine, I'll bear it. But after that, I won't be part of this family anymore. You should say something. My sister-in-law stood up and lightly pushed me with an annoyed look. I've thought of a way to get the 50 million. Really? You've got a solution? I saw my mother's eyes brighten immediately. But it might damage our reputation. What do you mean by that? I smiled faintly. At tonight's banquet, I met a wealthy foreign businessman. After hearing about my situation, he's willing to pay the 50 million. But he has a wife and kids, so I can only be his mistress. I really had no other choice but to agree. But once that happens, when we appear together, our relationship will no longer be a secret. How could you do something so shameless? Yeah, if you become his mistress, we'll be the laughingstock at every party. Then what do you suggest we do? Should we sell some of our properties to get the 50 million for Cyril? For a moment, no one responded, and it was completely silent. My father, who had been silent up until now, suddenly spoke. The 50 million must be paid. We can't lose face as a family. I purposely sneered. Then why don't you just disown me as your daughter? My sister-in-law, holding her pregnant belly, muttered under her breath, at least you know your place. All right then. My father finally made a decision. They would announce publicly that they were severing ties with me, but it would just be a formality. I would still be their daughter, but I knew this was just a way of placating me. Once the 50 million was paid off, I would be kicked out immediately. But what they didn't know was that this was exactly what I wanted. The next morning at 9 a.m., I got a call from Egbert. Check your messages. The money should have come through. I quickly opened the message, and sure enough, the money had been deposited 10 minutes ago. I've received it. Go take care of the annulment today. I'll have the driver pick you up. Egbert, can I ask you a favor? Sure. Can you please not let anyone know about our marriage for now? I didn't want those greedy vultures to attach themselves to Egbert, causing unnecessary trouble for him. You don't want anyone to know? It's not that. Just for now, is that okay? All right, I'll arrange for someone else to pick you up. Once the 50 million was returned to Cyril and my parents announced the severing of ties. If Egbert wanted to make our marriage public or keep it hidden, I would fully cooperate with him. At that point, because they had disowned me first, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble for Egbert, no matter what. After transferring the money to Cyril's account, I took a photo of the payment receipt. When Cyril called, I saw the statement from my family announcing they had cut ties with me. I stared at the few lines of text, reading them over and over again. Then I took a picture and carefully saved it. Cyril's voice sounded hoarse. Where did you get the money? 50 million isn't a small sum. Your parents couldn't come up with it. Who gave it to you? Be clear. That's none of your business. Once you get the money, we'll have no more ties. I was about to hang up. But then Cyril suddenly called my name. Wallace, do you think I care about the 50 million? Whatever your reason is, it's none of my concern. Wallace, you should know that if I don't let go, no man will dare to marry you. I chuckled softly into the phone. Is that so? If you don't believe it, you can always try. I didn't want to waste any more time with him, so I hung up. Just as the call ended, it rang again. I was about to block the number but saw the name on the screen, Egbert. Your family is really cutting ties with you? How do you know? I was surprised. He seemed to know everything. Wallace. If it's hard for you, you don't have to hold it in. I honestly didn't want to cry. I really didn't. But since I was little, I'd gotten used to it. So used to it that I was numb. I'm not upset. But when someone cares about you, you're always a little more vulnerable. So when I spoke, my voice was already filled with tears. You can cry in front of me. After all, starting tomorrow, I'll be your husband. I couldn't hold back my tears. But before becoming your wife, I've arranged another identity for you. What identity? I spoke in a small, timid voice. Egbert was silent for half a minute before saying. So, my current identity is a 60-year-old rich foreign businessman, and you're my mistress? Are you mad? He seemed to let out a small sigh on the other end of the line. I'll see you tomorrow. Do you still want to marry me? I could clearly tell he wasn't too happy just now. Rest well today. Wear your prettiest dress tomorrow. Egbert must have made arrangements ahead of time. So the whole marriage registration process went smoothly and quickly. After we got the marriage certificate, Egbert took me to the hospital. He kept holding my hand, and we looked very affectionate. His grandfather was seriously ill and could barely smile at me, but seemed pleased. I felt a bit uncomfortable inside. Having to deceive an elderly man who was about to die. He must have loved his grandson dearly, hoping for a peaceful marriage. But he didn't know, I wasn't really Egbert's wife. After leaving the hospital, Egbert had an important meeting, so he had the driver take me home to get my luggage. The driver was a veteran, someone who had watched Egbert grow up. He was old now, his hair and beard all white but still sharp and energetic. When my family saw him get out of the car and open the door for me, they all assumed he was my sugar daddy. Because they looked down on my mistress status, no one even bothered to talk to me. I carried my suitcase downstairs. Only my father said a few words to me. This is just temporary. You'll stay elsewhere for a while. Once things die down, we'll bring you back. I purposely asked pitifully, how long will I have to wait? It depends on the situation. Then the things you promised should still count. Don't worry. When I dragged my suitcase out, I could clearly feel the relief in their expressions. The driver took me to Egbert's private residence. The house wasn't too big, but it was peaceful and serene. There were no maids or servants, which made me feel more at ease. Ma'am, the sir has instructed that you can make yourself at home. He'll be back tonight. But at 8 p.m., I received a call from Egbert. He had to go back to the mainland for a very important meeting and wouldn't be back until a week later. If you get bored, go out with friends, go shopping, or have some tea. Don't stay cooped up at home all day. I'll stay at my little apartment for a few days. It's close to Central, and everything is convenient there. I'll come pick you up when I get back. All right. On the third day of Egbert's business trip, I received a call from a volunteer I had worked with before. She invited me to a small charity auction in the high society circle. The theme this time caught my interest. It was a fundraising event for children with congenital heart disease. When I arrived, I saw quite a few familiar faces. Among them was Stacy. She was still dressed up elegantly, but she clearly looked unwell. It seemed that being kicked off the boat that day had affected her more than I had imagined. Stacy saw me too, but all she did was sneer and then talk to the people next to her. Is it true what they're saying? She's turned into a mistress? Of course, it's true. Her parents disowned her because she was such an embarrassment. Didn't you see the news? I heard her sugar daddy is almost 80. He could be her grandfather. Oh my God. How could they invite someone like her to a charity event? Yeah, we shouldn't participate with someone like her. Let's ask her to leave. The atmosphere started to get tense, and the hostess, who had invited me, looked extremely embarrassed. Maybe you should come back another time. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I stood up to leave. But as I reached the door, I ran into Cyril. Wallace? I didn't respond and kept walking. Cyril grabbed my wrist. Are you here to see me? I pulled my hand away. No. I just heard about your situation today. Cyril blocked my path again. Wallace, you should return the money. Why? I couldn't help but scoff. Wasn't that what you wanted? 50 million? Wallace. Cyril's face darkened. I told you, just admit you're wrong once. How should I admit it? I pushed him away again. Should I kneel before you like a dog and thank you for your kindness? It was laughable. No one knew that beneath Cyril's polished image, he was the type who loved to humiliate people with his money and power. My life wasn't worth much, but I wasn't about to let him degrade me like that. You're ruined now. You should think about the consequences of your actions. Cyril changed the subject. At such a young age, being someone's mistress. It's my choice. Wallace, I'm giving you a chance to back down. Is that so? I don't need it. I walked past him and kept heading for the door. Cyril's voice came from behind me, low and threatening. I'm only giving you one chance. Think carefully and come find me when you're sure. I didn't look back. But that night, I got a call from my landlord. He demanded that I move out immediately. I didn't argue with him, just packed my things and went downstairs. To my surprise, when I reached the bottom, I saw Egbert's car. The driver got out and took my suitcase. Ma'am, Mr. Egbert sent me to pick you up. Egbert, he's back? He'll be back early tomorrow morning. My eyes suddenly stung with tears. Has he finished all his work? We had agreed on a week, but it was only the 4th day. Mr. Egbert is worried about you. He didn't want you to feel wronged. I'm fine, really. His work is important. Don't let me delay him. As I sat in the car, I felt a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite put into words. It felt like being abandoned by the whole world, only to suddenly inherit a fortune beyond imagination. When we arrived at Egbert's place, I had just returned to my room when his call came through. Wallace. Egbert's voice had a trace of fatigue in it. I felt deeply ashamed. To escape my family's control, I had deliberately tarnished my reputation. He worked so hard, yet I still managed to cause him more trouble. If I had stayed quietly at his house, none of this would have happened. Egbert. I'm sorry. Egbert sounded a bit helpless. I'm not blaming you. Let's talk more when you come back tomorrow. After the call ended, I saw I had a new follower on Instagram. It was Egbert. His IG only had one post, uploaded 3 days ago, a photo of our marriage certificate. I couldn't see the comments, but I did see 2 replies to friends. Yes, we're married. Let me introduce my wife, Wallace. That night, I posted something on my IG, just 4 simple words. Getting married soon. Many people commented, some friends even called me. When I answered the phone, it was Cyril's voice. So, have you made up your mind? I said I'd give you one chance, but I never said I'd marry you. I couldn't help but laugh lightly. I never said the groom was you. You're going to marry that old man? Wallace, you've really sunk this low, willing to become a mistress to a married man. I hung up and blocked him immediately. That night, my mind was filled with so many thoughts I couldn't sleep. I only managed to fall asleep when the sky was starting to lighten. I didn't even realize when Egbert came home. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw a figure coming out of the bathroom. I almost screamed, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. It's me, Wallace. Don't be scared. I pressed my hand to my wildly beating heart, still pale. Egbert held me in his arms, gently stroking my back. Slow your breathing, don't worry, relax. It's okay, Wallace. I rested my head on his chest, slowly calming down. Once I was calm, I suddenly realized. I was only wearing a silk nightgown, and Egbert had just finished showering, with his upper body bare and just wearing sleep pants. I'm fine now. I muttered, my face turning bright red, and gently pulled away from his embrace. Sorry if I scared you. Egbert fixed my messy hair. Why did you sleep so long? I had a bit of insomnia last night. I felt uneasy. My sleepwear was so thin, and I didn't wear a bra when I slept. Earlier, I had been tightly held in his arms, with only the flimsy fabric between us. My face felt like it was burning. I grabbed the blanket, trying to cover myself, but it felt like I was drawing even more attention. Just when I didn't know what to do, Egbert gently helped me lie back down. Sleep a little longer, it's almost noon anyway. How about we just have lunch? He naturally tucked the blanket around me. I'll go to the study, I'll come get you when it's time. As I watched him leave, I sighed in relief, letting out a quiet breath. The daytime was fine, as he mostly spent his time working in the study. But at 9 p.m., when he came back to the master bedroom, he showed no intention of leaving. Honestly, I had thought about fulfilling my marital duties after the wedding. After all, I had promised him that I would cooperate with all his needs. I watched Egbert come out of the bathroom. After hesitating for a long while, I gently asked, "Are you sleeping here tonight?" Egbert glanced at me without saying a word. I felt confused, wondering if perhaps Egbert just needed a wife in name only. Maybe I was overthinking things. I grabbed a pillow and got out of bed, tentatively speaking, "Should I sleep in the guest room then?" He still didn't answer. I turned and started walking towards the door, holding the pillow, but after a few steps, I was suddenly embraced from behind. "Didn't you say you would cooperate fully with my needs?" Egbert. My back was pressed against his firm chest. I could feel his heart beating rapidly, and his body heat seemed to rise, making me dizzy. Egbert lowered his head, his fingers gently brushing aside the strands of hair at the back of my neck. "Wallace, you're my wife now." I leaned into his embrace, gently closing my eyes. I melted into his arms as he lifted me and placed me on the soft bed. When he kissed me, my fingers tightened around his arm. My heart was racing so fast, it felt like I couldn't breathe. The kiss became fragmented. "Tell me if anything's wrong." Egbert touched my flushed face, and after my heartbeat calmed a bit, he continued. There were several times when I honestly felt like I was about to suffocate. But Egbert always knew when to stop and hold back. I could feel his muscles tensing beneath his skin, subtly trembling. Sweat from his forehead fell, sizzling as it landed on my chest. His heartbeat was as frantic as mine, and his breathing was short and quick. I was in pain, but he seemed to be suffering more than I was. His voice was hoarse as he leaned down to kiss my face. "Are you feeling better?" I shook my head, then nodded. But my eyes were already hazy, and my hands had unknowingly gripped his neck. It was like I was resisting, yet at the same time, it felt like I was giving in. Desire flickered in his eyes. For a brief moment, I even had the illusion that Egbert might actually like me. He leaned down again, his movements more forceful. At the very end, I lost consciousness for about 2 seconds. But it didn't hurt like it had when I was ill. Instead, I felt as if I were floating on a cloud, surrounded by soft, gentle clouds. Until Egbert woke me up. "Wan, is anything wrong?" I shook my head again, but gently reached out to hold his waist. A woman, when it comes to her first man, seems to have an inherent sense of dependence. Egbert wrapped me in his arms. "Rest for a bit, then we'll take a shower," he said, his fingers resting over my chest. "Is your heart okay?" "Fine." I thought about the pauses in between. Unable to help myself, I asked softly, "Egbert, are you feeling okay?" He cupped my face and kissed me, his voice low. "If you keep asking, you'll really make me uncomfortable." "No more." "Okay, no more." He didn't let go of me though. "I just want to kiss you." I stopped speaking and obediently let him kiss me. In my muddled thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder. When he called me Wan, it felt so affectionate. But a man like him, serious and self-disciplined, would probably only ever say that in bed. I never got the chance to verify my suspicion. Because the next morning, Egbert was out the door early again. I knew he was extremely busy, given his position, there were countless matters to take care of. So I stayed at home, trying not to add to his troubles. Although I didn't leave the house, the days were quiet and peaceful. It was the first time I felt the beauty of time slowing down at the age of 21. I didn't have to worry about being sold off like a commodity by my family. I didn't have to be sad because of my parents' biases. I didn't have to think about anything, just doing things that made me happy. I even picked up the piano again after years of neglect. Bought an online painting course and started learning oil painting. A week passed in this peaceful, stay-at-home routine. One afternoon, Egbert suddenly called and said there was a banquet that evening that I should attend. He had already prepared the dress and jewelry, and a team of stylists would be coming to the house soon. "Are you going tonight? I'll come find you after I finish." "What's the banquet for? Is it a must attend?" "It's a charity fundraising dinner for children with congenital heart disease." "I thought you'd want to go." I was touched. The last charity event I couldn't attend, because of the scandal spread by Stacy, was also for children with heart disease. Egbert still remembered that. Because I had a congenital heart problem, I've always cared deeply about such causes. I remember, even after getting engaged to Cyril, I still went to volunteer every month, visiting sick or disabled children at the welfare home. But Cyril once mocked me, "You're good at the game of seeking fame." But he didn't know, I wasn't doing it for recognition. I just wanted to help more children like me, because I knew the pain firsthand. "Egbert, of course, I want to go. But if you come tonight, our situation will no longer be hidden." I wanted to ask if this would cause him any trouble or harm his reputation. "You're the one who wanted to keep it low-key from the start, not me." "Egbert." I gripped the phone, a little confused. "I don't understand, why? Why did he agree to this? Why had he never considered hiding our marriage? Why was it me?" "I'll answer you when I get home tonight." When I arrived at the banquet, I naturally drew numerous curious stares. But what confused me slightly was, since Egbert was attending such a prestigious charity event, the standard of the event must have been high. Cyril could attend, but no one from my family would be there. Yet, there was Cyril, and there was my family. When I walked in, they were gathered around Cyril, chatting warmly. My older sister, Sylvia, looked at Cyril with shy and burning eyes. "Wallace, how dare you show your face here?" Sylvia spoke in surprise, and my mother immediately came over, her face stern. "Don't you know what kind of event this is? You've come to embarrass us. What will others think of us?" I looked at the elegant and poised woman before me, my heart already cold. Weren't we already cut off? "So, I have no relationship with you anymore. Everyone knows you're my daughter. Then what do you suggest we do?" "Wallace, leave now. Have your man take you abroad or back to his country. Didn't Dad promise that I could come back after things settled?" She looked at me like I was crazy. "Are you dreaming? We've already disowned you." "Really?" "Of course, it's true. So, legally and in terms of family ties, I have no relationship with any of you." "Fine." I turned and looked around. I'm sure everyone has heard what she said. "Wallace, you'd better leave quickly. Why cause a scene and make a fool of yourself?" Sylvia feigned gentleness. "Cyril's here. Don't make a joke out of it." At this moment, Cyril finally spoke up. "Wallace, didn't you say you were getting married?" "Cyril, that old man is married with kids and has mistresses all over the world. There's no way he'd really marry her." "So, your IG post the other day was fake?" Just as I was about to respond, Cyril stepped forward and grabbed my arm. "I'm asking you again." Before I could say anything, the ballroom suddenly fell silent. "Mr. Egbert has arrived. Why would he come to such a small gathering?" "How would I know? But tonight is a real treat to meet the real Mr. Egbert. Why is he heading this way? Oh my God, Mr. Egbert is staring in this direction. Is he looking at Sylvia?" Hearing these comments, Sylvia's face quickly turned bright red. My mother also couldn't hide her joy. I turned to look at Egbert. He was still in his black business suit, looking as serious and unapproachable as ever. At this moment, I couldn't help but feel a little dazed. The man I had only seen on TV and in the papers, now he was my husband. He had kissed me countless times, called me Wan Wan, and treated me with so much tenderness, like an incredibly loving husband. "Wallace." Egbert spoke. This was the first time he called my name in front of so many people. Sylvia's smile froze awkwardly. My mother looked stunned. Cyril was even more surprised. I shook off his hand, my eyes red with grievance. Egbert. He walked through the crowd and directly approached me. Your dress is beautiful today. Your makeup is also perfect, you look stunning. I felt like crying and laughing at the same time. As tears were about to fall, Egbert, in front of everyone, pulled me into his arms. Alright, I'm just a few minutes late, and people start bullying you. When he said the word bullying, his gaze swept indifferently over the crowd. My mother's face turned pale, and Sylvia instinctively hid behind her. Egbert's gaze finally landed on Cyril. What were you talking about with my wife? The word wife in Egbert's sentence felt like a bomb. The crowd, which had been silent just moments ago, instantly erupted in whispers. Cyril seemed to still be in disbelief and asked, Wife? Yes, Wallace is my wife, Egbert's wife. As soon as Egbert finished speaking, my mother seemed to snap out of her trance. She quickly walked up to me and affectionately grabbed my arm. Why didn't you tell me about this great news? I pushed her hand away. I'm no longer your daughter. She froze for a moment before hastily saying, There's no grudge between a mother and daughter, we just misunderstood. We can clear this up. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. I have no ties to you or your family, legally or morally. She broke into a cold sweat and looked desperately at Egbert. Mr. Egbert, we had some misunderstandings with her. She says whatever she says. Egbert wrapped his arm around me, his voice cold. If she says she has no connection to you, then there's no connection. As far as I know, your company hasn't donated a single cent to charity in the past 10 years. Upon hearing this, my mother's face went ashen, and she stiffly tried to argue but couldn't say a word. So you've never donated a penny? Then why does the Jiang family push so hard to attend charity galas every time? To fish for fame. How shameless. She had no face left to stay and quickly fled with Sylvia. Egbert wrapped his arm around me. Let's go home. You haven't donated to the children yet. I reminded him softly. Egbert lowered his head and kissed me. The secretary is handling it. Egbert, my heart, I don't think I can take it much longer. The dimly lit room spun as I felt dizzy. The familiar sensation of suffocation hit me, and I gripped his arm, turning my face to breathe deeply. Egbert bent down, pressing his forehead against mine. Baby. I could feel how hard this was for him. But my body was betraying me. Egbert, maybe you should marry a healthy wife. Wallace. Egbert's gaze was unusually serious. There's no shortage of healthy women in this world. But with my condition. What's wrong with you? He pushed my damp hair away from my forehead. Wallace, to me, you're the best. Egbert. If your health isn't good, we'll take our time to nurture you, to treat you. If it can't be treated here, we'll go abroad. But what if it still can't be treated? Egbert bent down and kissed me gently. Then I'll practice abstinence and focus on self-discipline. As the new year approached, Egbert finally had some free time. He took me abroad to see what was said to be the best heart surgeon. I was nervous during the checkup. Egbert habitually helped me adjust my hair. Don't be nervous, I'll be right here waiting for you. After all the detailed and professional checks, the elderly doctor with all white hair looked at me with some pity. I've looked at your report. You're one of the less severe cases of congenital heart disease. If you had undergone surgery as a child, you would have already recovered by now. I looked at the doctor in disbelief, shaking my head. Doctor, are you sure? My family always told me that my condition was untreatable. They took me to many hospitals, but the diagnosis was always the same. Later, I refused to go to any more hospitals. I couldn't stand being told again and again that I was going to die. They told me that as long as I spent money on special care, I'd survive and grow up, and it was all thanks to them. When Egbert hugged me, I realized that I had been crying silently. They lied to me, didn't they? Why did they lie to me? Why did they treat me like that? If they didn't want to treat me, why did they even bother having me? Why did they deceive me for all these years? Wallace, don't think about these things anymore. You can get better, that's the most important thing, do you understand? I just don't get it. Egbert hugged me tighter. Then don't think about those meaningless things. Let's look forward, don't look back. When spring came, Egbert came to pick me up to go home. By then, I had been discharged from the hospital and my body was recovering well. A few days ago, his grandfather's condition worsened and he had to go to the hospital overnight. It wasn't until the day before yesterday, when his grandfather's condition stabilized, that he was able to relax. We hadn't seen each other for a full half-month. Egbert got out of the car but didn't come toward me. We had made a promise earlier. When we met again, I would run to him. Like every healthy girl. He opened his arms. I lifted my skirt and ran down the stairs, through the lush green garden, light as a feather, running in the spring breeze. For the first time in 21 years, I ran like this. Even the slightly chilly spring wind felt warm. I rushed into his arms without a second thought. I tilted my head up to kiss him. But today I was wearing flat shoes, and he was just too tall. I had to stand on my tiptoes. But he lowered his head, meeting me halfway for the kiss. It's been nearly a year since I married Egbert. But that night, it was the first time I saw him let go and indulge himself. He kissed the scar on my chest, the mark left by the surgery, still clear, a little ugly. I didn't want him to see it, so I raised my hand to cover it. But Egbert wouldn't let me. Is it very ugly? As beautiful as that night. So you've been eyeing me from the start? No, even earlier than you think. When was that? Did you see me before? Wallace, are you sure you want to reminisce with your husband at a time like this? Egbert locked my hands and leaned down again. Egbert. I feel dizzy, I can't breathe. I used the same trick again. He didn't believe me, of course, but he still paused when things got the most intense. My heart raced, but it didn't hurt and twist like it used to. What surged inside me was just the unstoppable tide of emotion. I wrapped my arms around him, gently biting his chin. Egbert, you don't have to worry about my body anymore. From now on, you can do whatever you want. I've seen Egbert serious and composed in meetings. I've seen him lead multinational conferences at the office, speaking several languages fluently and competently. But at home, he has a more easygoing and relaxed side. Even the servants at home sometimes joke around with him. But the moment he stops smiling, everyone around him instantly falls silent, like they're frozen in place. And right now, in his eyes, there was a clear desire, a powerful possessiveness. He allowed himself to give in to passion, and together we fell into the whirlwind of desire. In endless pleasure, he seemed to be even more indulgent, more devoted than I was. Before, I never understood why someone so close to me would treat me this way. But now I understood. All the hardships and grievances of these past years were just to bring me back to Egbert. Egbert, are you? This was the first time I asked, and before I could finish, it was as though Egbert already knew what I was about to ask. His kiss landed on my ear, his warm, wet fingers entangled tightly with mine. I heard his voice, hoarse and deep, stirring. Wallace, I love you. And,